did.
No, I didn't.
I told Dad.
We're on Tony Perkins' stage, and he's perfect. But I remember as we started to go down an embankment, by God's grace, we didn't flip over or anything like that. We stopped 1 inch from a pine tree. We got out, and man, that was a nice day. But I remember the feeling of when I woke up and realized the man who's supposed to be driving us in this direction, that I'm supposed to entrust with my safety, that I'm supposed to entrust to get me to where I'm supposed to go, was asleep. And you know what? When you're asleep, there are 3 things that are true when you are asleep. You are unaware of what's going on around you, right? You guys agree with this? You are unconcerned about what's going on around you. He did not care that we were headed into a ditch. He did not care. Why?
Because I did care. I was just asleep.
He was unconscious. He was unconscious. He was unconcerned about the direction that we were going. But thirdly, he was unable to do anything about the direction we were going. When you are asleep, you are unable to do anything about what's going on around you until you wake up. Do you know what's happening right now? We have pastors in pulpits who refuse to touch the issues that need to be addressed from the pulpits today. But we're still having great church, great big church services. And you know what? I understand oftentimes what it's like to be scared, what it's like to where if you say, no, homosexuality, no, it's not right, marriage is between a man and a woman. Listen, that doesn't mean I hate you. It means I love you and I'm willing to give you God's truth. But you know what? The minute you say that, you're vilified. You are absolutely vilified. And so what happens? The conscience goes dark as the pastors step away and they're no longer the light anymore. You think we need Christians to vote in this election this year? In November? Well, we need the pastors to wake up and tell their folks, listen, get out there and get to the polls. But first, we've got to wake up. And I want to tell you this. The persecution that's in America today and that's actually going to continue to be increasing is what God is using to wake us up. And may we all in this room stay awake and wake everyone up that we can.
The problem today is not the presence of darkness. The problem is the absence of light. When Jason goes to bed at night, he does not tell his wife to turn the darkness on. He says, please turn the light off. The nature of darkness is that immorality and vice and malice and rage and all of these things will rise when the light of God's Word is turned off. So all we have to do is turn it back on. And you know what we'll find when we turn it back on? That there's a 3-fold strategic plan that is happening. Now, Jason and I, we speak in colleges and we'll speak to a lot of the younger crowds, so we have to try to shrink our thoughts into tweetable statements.
Yeah, that's why that's code for my brother has a small brain. I can extend it out a little longer.
So we have to think in these tweetable statements. That's why we came up with acceptance, to appreciation, to celebration, to forced participation. But what we see is an attack on our freedoms, and it starts with this. It starts with frame, then facilitate, then fracture. You frame the issue. And what's happening now is when believers in God that have the Word of God refuse to speak about the truth of the issues of the day from God's perspective in a loving, respectful way, but to engage the debate, what's going to happen is the issue will then be framed. The terms will be redefined and the conflict will be created. And that's exactly what happens. That's exactly how Saul Alinsky back in the 60s wrote it in Rules for Radicals. You create the conflict, and then you push a negative until it pushes through to become a positive. So you frame the issue. You frame immigration the way you want it framed, and you get liberal media to support your narrative. You frame racism. You frame abortion. You frame marriage. You frame these things. You redefine the terms. And then what you do, you facilitate your support network. So you get Hollywood stars. You get pro athletes. Why on earth would the New England Patriots be involved with an amicus brief on gay marriage? I have absolutely no idea. But what you can't get with policy, you will get with culture. Because policy is downstream from culture. So you facilitate your support network. And you get all of these talking heads out there pushing your narrative because you've already framed it. And so the whole reason, churches are up there having their church services and growing and pastors are getting big book deals, the whole time these issues are being framed and we don't even want to touch it. And the networks are getting facilitated. And then what happens, the third, is fracture all dissent. You vilify people. And when you begin, if anyone dares to speak up, they become a hater, they become a bigot, they become a Nazi, they become all of these things. And trust me, watch, remember, the ceiling always becomes the floor in this revolution. If you've got Colin Kaepernick and others, and now the Seahawks are talking about not kneeling, and look, there can be some discussion around that, but for heaven's sakes, watch what happens. Those that will stand and salute the flag will become the bigots. That's what the narrative will do. So we have to actually speak up. We have to engage in this conversation. Jason and I, in our own home state, most of you are paying attention to North Carolina. With House Bill 2 and everything that's happening now, they're pushing this purple unicorn. What do they call it? The gender unicorn on our kids in schools in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. Do you know what they're teaching this gender unicorn to ask the students? 2 questions. Who do you go to bed as? And who do you like to go to bed with? Now let me tell you something. That is the responsibility of the parents. There is no reason we need to be pushing that kind of immoral revolution on our kids. But what happens is now you stand up and speak and say that's wrong. Jason and I stood against that. The headline the next morning in a newspaper in North Carolina, it said, like a recurring case of herpes, the Benham brothers are back again. Here's what's interesting. I don't have a clue what a recurring case of herpes feels like because we live within the boundaries of God's Word. And when you live within His boundaries, amen, it's just that simple.
I want to read a quote from a guy named Albert Camus, who was a French existentialist. It's
the biggest
word.
It's a big word,
and I'm so glad I was able to say it. During World War II, listen to what he said. There always comes a time in history when the person who dares to say that 2 + 2 = 4 is punished with prison or death. And the issue is not what reward or what punishment will be the outcome of such reasoning. The issue is simply whether or not 2 + 2 = 4. This is the greatest time ever to be alive. God Almighty has put every single one of you in this room at this time, in this nation's history, so that you can stand for the truth that 2 + 2 = 4, even when the culture says that it equals 5 or it equals 6, or you know what, it could equal whatever you want it to be. But see, we will stand on the truth. Why? Because truth is a man, and His name is Jesus Christ. And no matter what, we will stand for Him. That's it.
I want to finish with a quote, and I lost my phone in the green room, so I am going to paraphrase the first of this
Michelle
quote.
Bachmann stole it.
Yeah, I think she did. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America. And he came over here, and you're looking at the 2 revolutions, not directly at the exact same time, but the French Revolution looking at the American Revolution. Here you see these revolutions, and here Alexis de Tocqueville, he speaks and he says, I sought for the key to the secret and genius of America's power in her ample fields, in her boundless forests, in her commodious harbors, but it was not there. I even sought for it in her democratic Congress and in her matchless Constitution, but it was not there. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits ablaze with righteousness did I understand the key to America's greatness and power. America is great because America is good. And when America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. Now, we believe that America will be good once again when we return to the God of this book. God bless you guys. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Director of Sponsored Content for Liftable Media, Luca Cabrillo.
Thank you. It truly is a great honor and privilege to introduce the next speaker. By any stretch of the imagination, Michelle Bachmann is an accomplished woman. That's right. A tireless fighter for conservative principles and family values, Congresswoman Bachmann has been a public servant for decades. She represented the great people of Minnesota in Congress from 2007 to 2015, during which time she also launched her candidacy for the President of the United States. She's a proud mother of 5 and one of the staunchest defenders of pro-life principles in the political arena to ever exist. However, the thing that I respect most about Congresswoman Bachmann is the fact that she always ran on the issues and her principles and not on her gender, unlike some of the candidates running today. Thank you. Thank you. So, if you will, please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann.
Hi, everyone. Are you loving it today? I'm loving it today. Thank you for being here at the Family Research Council Values Voters Summit. We have got a big task on our hands in the next 2 months, don't we? And beyond. Who's suited up for it? Stand up. You suited up for it. Who else is suited up for it? Stand up. You suited up for it. Who else? You suited up for it. Who else? Who suited up for it? Who else? Okay, all right. The rest of you, be ashamed. Be very ashamed. No, I understand that it's time for the speeches. And I am here for one reason. I told Tony Perkins that what is important to me is to let the most important voting bloc in the United States get a message. Do you know who that voting bloc is? It is believers in Jesus Christ. The believing community across the United States statistically will be the voting bloc that chooses who the next president of the United States is. Do you realize that? Do you realize the level of power and influence that a mighty God has laid into the hands of those who call on his name? We have a powerful opportunity. And one thing that we need to keep in mind is a sense of urgency. People have gone through this whole long process. Don't you wish elections were like 6 weeks long? I do. This has kind of gone out. 3.5 years is kind of a long time. But what we recognize is that this year in 2016 really is like no other year we have had before, because we have never seen the level of American decline in the way that we have for the last 7.5 years. Who agrees with me? Okay, good. But who agrees with me that in all likelihood, the United States of America may not survive another 8-year dilemma of tailspin American decline? That's how serious it is. Because you see, I believe this. If there will be 2 candidates this fall, every 4 years there's always a third-party candidate or fourth-party candidate that comes into play in these elections. But if you look at American history, it always comes down to 2, count them, 1, 2 candidates. And it's going to be one of the 1, 2 candidates. This year is no different. It will either be Donald Trump or it will be Hillary Clinton, one of the 2. And just like the book of Deuteronomy teaches us, that I have set before you life and death, which will you choose? What is so odd is that throughout history, you can begin in Genesis. You don't even have to go beyond chapters 3 and 4 to see that mankind is given a choice, life and death. And what did mankind choose? Mankind chose the way that was rebellion against a holy God. And so the entire rest of Scripture is a scarlet thread of redemption, of a loving God, a creator God who says to his creation, I love you so much, I want you back. I will be willing to come in the form and likeness of you and give my life to pay for your sin so that you can come back to me. That's the story of Scripture. We always have the chance to come back to a holy God, into his fold. Life and death, what do we choose? America's made a lot of choices in recent years that aren't necessarily reflective of his word. Those choices have brought about sorrow and sadness, because that's what sin does. It creates sadness. And we've seen sadness in our midst and sadness in our land. And it's entirely preventable because we've been given an owner's manual in the form of the Old Testament, the Tanakh, and the New Testament to, again, make the way where there is no way and bridge that unbridgeable river so that mankind can make their way back to a holy God, not by anything we do, but all by the grace of a loving God. In this election, we have at stake before us something that's highly unusual that we haven't had before. Because I am a Republican, I don't know if any of you know that, but I am a Republican, and one thing that the opposition party understands very well is that elections are basically a math game. It's a math question, and it comes down to this. Which of the two candidates will have more votes at the end of the day? It's that even if you've gone through Common Core, you can probably even understand that. At the end of the day, one will prevail. Which will it be? And so if you noticed, on the Republican side, the candidate Donald Trump has been talking about some pretty hard-hitting issues like immigration. Are we actually going to still be a country and maintain our sovereignty and keep our people safe and free from people who do us harm coming across our border? He's been giving speeches about that, about American foreign policy. I'm a former federal tax litigation attorney. I'm just here to certify this is probably the most Reagan-esque tax plan that Donald Trump has come up with in recent times, and we need to build up our economy, and Donald Trump has a plan to do that. On every single level, if you look at the agenda that Donald Trump has put forward, it's been one that I, as a constitutional conservative, as a believer in Jesus Christ, can not only easily embrace, but readily embrace. In fact, people have said, oh, when you look at Donald Trump and you look at Hillary Clinton, there is, and I look at these parties, there isn't a dime's worth of difference between these candidates. I'm here to tell you there isn't a dime's worth of similarity between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I served with Hillary Clinton. I was on the Intelligence Committee when the Benghazi tragedy came down, and I saw how Mrs. Clinton completely flunked her test as Commander-in-Chief. Just Benghazi alone is sufficient reason to reject her as the next President of the United States. Why? Because we had literally hundreds of requests for increased security. She slammed the door. When the Brits, the Canadians, the Red Cross were abandoning Benghazi, she kept our people there. And not only did she not fulfill the security requests, she pulled back security supports that we had in place. During the Benghazi attack, for the 13 hours when she should have been in the Situation Room for 13 hours, when we had a drone overhead watching the real-time battle unfold, she should have done what every other Secretary of State in American history did, and that's call in a military response to save people who are being massacred on the ground. She did not do that. She did not make that request. Flunk. Failure. You cannot be Commander-in-Chief and leave Americans on an active battlefield. And we know immediately she knew this was a terrorist attack, but yet she told the people that she really trusts, like her daughter, that this was a terrorist attack, but for the families of the dead, she told them a lie, that she persisted, that it was some fake, phony internet video, because of course, under no circumstances can we ever insult Islam. That's Hillary Clinton. So you see, there is a compare and contrast like you can't believe. And if Hillary Clinton comes in as the President of the United States, her first act will be to ensure her re-election. And the way she will do that will be to grant unconstitutional, illegal amnesty for millions of people who are in the United States illegally, so that she can turn them into voters for her 4 years later. It isn't that we're anti-immigrant. I'm not. I married the son of an immigrant. Probably most of you in here have very strong immigrant connections. We're not against. We need immigrants. But you must follow the rule of law. That's fundamental. The greatest casualty on the battlefield of Barack Obama's administration has been the exaltation of lawlessness in the United States. That is Barack Obama's legacy. Think of that. Lawlessness in the United States. Does anyone for a moment think that Hillary Clinton will revert to upholding the law if she is President of the United States? It is not going to happen. Donald Trump will stand as a law and order president, and not only will he build up a veneration for the rule of law, he is committed to building up our economy with the greatest tax plan since Ronald Reagan. He is committed to building up our military, which I can tell you again as a member of the Intelligence Committee, it has been so devastated that there were times when I would leave our committee shaking in fear for our country. I couldn't believe the level of vulnerability. Do you realize that in our lifetime, we have been privileged to live in the greatest economic powerhouse that the world has ever known, the United States of America. We have been privileged to live in the greatest military powerhouse that the world has ever known, the United States of America. It didn't happen just because we were lucky people on this land. It happened because the people of this nation were not afraid to name a holy God as their God. And we had a critical mass of individuals who were not ashamed of the Old Testament or of the New Testament. And they lived their lives in accordance with that. Certainly not the entire nation. I'm not trying to say that. But decidedly, this was a nation that chose within our laws to honor God. That redounded to our benefit. And also in 1948, when the Jewish state of Israel announced its independence, it was the United States 11 minutes with a Democrat president, Harry Truman, that said to Israel and the whole world, "We will have your back." And we did. That has fostered a tremendous relationship between the United States and the Jewish state. And I believe one of the most dangerous events of the Obama administration was July of 2015, when it was the Obama administration that took the lead to advance the Iran agreement, which was the greatest fear that Israel had. Because you see, Iran is the chief state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And our president, for some inexplicable reason, we'd had sanctions in place for about 10 years. Iran was virtually on its knees. I was getting the briefings about what tough shape Iran was in. And our president, just exactly when we had Iran in a situation where we actually could put crimps on their nuclear program, did exactly the opposite. He rushed to enrich the Iranians. In fact, the story just came out in the last 24 to 48 hours that very likely the Obama administration has given in excess of $33 billion in cash and gold to the chief state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and that's according to the U.S. government. What are we choosing? Life or death? What are we choosing? When you put in excess of $33 billion in cash and gold in the hands of the chief state sponsor of terrorism in the world, who about every other day says death to the United States, death to Israel, what do you think they're going to do with that $33 billion? Their plan isn't to go and have an aid package to Israel, I think. Their plan is to continue not only to foster terrorism, but to buy on the black market the critical materials that they will need to get their nuclear program finalized, done. That's what they're doing. And they've been sending their little patrol boats like ants to come around our U.S. destroyers and ships in the Gulf. And any sane president would say, you do that, you're gone, and they'd be gone. That's what a sane president does. And that hasn't happened. As I started with my remarks, you see the decision is on our hands because we are the largest voting bloc in the United States. We can't say that the moral choice was to support neither candidate because you see, one will win. One will win. The book of Daniel says, the Most High God lifts up who he will and takes down who he will. Blessed be the name of the Lord. One thing we need to understand in all of this is that we do have this choice. And we have a choice again where I don't even think it's close. I'm not on the payroll of the Trump campaign. I'm here of my own volition. Because I am a mother to 5, a foster mother to 23, now a grandmother, greatest thing ever. But this is the other thing I get. We have been privileged to have a gift. Do we as believers recognize how privileged in the United States we are? You know, all these Hollywood people who say, if Donald Trump wins, I'm out of here. You're shortly going to hear from a Hollywood person who is awesome, Jon Voight. He'll be out here in just a minute. He's just the opposite. He's so fantastic. That's what Hollywood says. Well, it's easy for them to say that because, you see, they love socialism. They love centralized planners. They've got an entire world to choose from of socialist nations and central planners. What I ask you is this. Where do we go? Those of us who love constitutional republics. Last time I looked, I think we're it. Where are we supposed to go? So if Hillary wins, what's our lot? Well, I think we know what's going to happen in the Department of Justice, the Department of Injustice. We have never before seen the level of politicization of federal agencies as we have under Barack Obama. We saw an FBI director who actually stood up in front of the cameras and laid out a complete case as to why Hillary Clinton should be in jail wearing orange. And he didn't do it. And more evidence has come out since that is so blatant that she should be brought up by the FBI and recommended for felony charges and actually in time doing jail. We can't get justice now out of our FBI. We can't get justice out of the Department of Justice. I say to you churches, I say to you nonprofits, I say to you small business owners, what we have seen is a vindictiveness out of this White House like nothing we've ever seen before. Our Constitution guarantees equality before the law. that the rule of law prevails. That's not what's happened under this administration. We will see a heightened level, I believe, of vindication coming out of a Hillary Clinton White House, where I believe there will be prosecutions for churches, for nonprofits, for anyone that opposes the Hillary Clinton agenda. Open your eyes. You see, because we have been given this magnificent gift of liberty here in the United States, we have taken it for granted, thinking this is always the way it will be, and that this 7.5 years with Barack Obama is merely an aberration that can quickly be rectified. I'm here to tell you these aren't quickly rectified situations. When you have a president who doubles the debt in his tenure, that's not quickly rectified. When you enrich the chief state sponsor of terrorism with $150 billion for more terrorism and nuclear war, that's not quickly rectified. We got work to do. And what we need to understand is that we didn't just do this on our own. We stand on the shoulders of a great cloud of witnesses, of previous generations who scrimped and saved and sacrificed. The Pilgrims, the American Revolutionary War veterans, from every war going forward, our veterans whom we thank. We are given this magnificent gift because of what they gave to us, because of the businesses that our forefathers built up. We have been the beacon and blessing for the world. And don't think for a moment that that will be our lot going forward, because you see, history teaches us that when great nations fall in antiquity, they fall fast and they fall hard, and quite often they are no more. Don't think we are any different. We need to wake up. We need to grasp this opportunity that's in front of us. It is a magnificent opportunity, both as an homage to those who have come before, and thanks and appreciation for what they did for us. Even more importantly is our need to maintain the social and moral contract that we have with generations yet unborn, so that this shining city will forever stay on the hill. You can do that. That's what the church can do. That's what the faith-believing community can do. We can be that element that does the work that has to be done in the next 60 days. So there is a future, there is a hope, and there is a choice. God bless you. Thank you for letting me share this time with you this afternoon. I love you all. Thank you.
Michelle Bachmann. Wonderful. Aren't you glad she's on our side? You know, folks, just to reiterate much of what you've been heard, and I say this to values voters and the hundreds of thousands that are watching us, there's just more of us than there are of them when it comes to voting. It's just we need to vote. As I said earlier, the last election it turned on about 335,000 votes in 4 swing states, and that made all the difference in the world. If just a slight tick up among eligible evangelical Christian voters would just go to the polls and vote. Don't let the media convince you that this race is over. You have a voice, and you need to express your voice. It's your right. More than your right, it's your duty. It's your duty. All right, ladies and gentlemen, coming now is a man who could very well be the longest running chairman for the Republican National Convention in history. That's how good he is. Hailing from his home state of Wisconsin, he is credited with helping to bring nationally known figures such as Speaker of the House Paul Ryan and Governor of Wisconsin Scott Walker into power on the state level and into prominence on the national stage. And after the 2016 Republican primary season, I think he should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome RNC Chairman Reince Priebus.
Well, hello, and thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here. It's inspiring to be with all of you today. So many patriots this afternoon that want to change the course that we're on in this country, on a failed presidency, take back our country for freedom and American values. I want to thank like so many people up here, not just all of the sponsors up here, but one person in particular who's been very good to me, and that's Tony Perkins. He's been a good friend. So many folks that you hear from. You'd love to know that we get together often, share stories. Ken Blackwell, Tony Perkins, so many of folks that you're going to hear from. But we hold each other accountable. I'm also here as a teammate. I'm here to honor God every day that I can, every ounce of energy that I have. Ultimately, I want to make you proud of our party too, but it really starts with God and being the salt and light in the things that we say and the actions that we take. You're all on that front line to fight for the soul of our nation. And it's my privilege to be with you all today. So many people have said it already. We're here right now, 60 days out from Election Day. We're actually poised, in spite of what the media wants to tell you, we are poised to win back the White House, preserve our majorities in the House and the Senate, and ensure that we protect the Supreme Court from liberal activist judges. Just a few weeks ago, the media was writing off Donald Trump. But now he's closed the gap with Hillary Clinton. It's a neck-and-neck race, and make no mistake, Donald Trump is ready to win. And momentum's on his side, and the electorate's on his side. It's a change electorate. You actually saw it on both sides of the aisle. No one here thinks that Hillary Clinton is the change candidate. It's Donald Trump and the Republican Party and all of you that are listening to the grassroots voices from across this country. He's brought millions of new voters into the GOP who are concerned about their country. 14.5 million votes, the most any Republican has ever won in the history of Republican primaries. He knows that Americans have had enough. Enough of a government which plays by its own rules. Enough of a president who talks down to the American people about their guns and their religion. Enough of a Democrat nominee who lives above the law and thinks holding public office is a get-rich-quick strategy. The Democratic Party running Hillary Clinton, you know, even though it wasn't that long ago, it's not even the Democrat Party of 1992, 96, or even 2000. This is a party racing to adopt Bernie Sanders' wish list of socialist policies. Donald Trump is standing in the breach to make sure that that doesn't happen. He's fighting for middle-class families who love America and want to see prosperity come back to our country. He's calling radical Islamic terror for what it is, and he's committed to uprooting and punishing terrorists wherever they may be found. Christians, Jews, and other religious minorities are getting slaughtered across the Middle East. And Donald Trump is going to stand up for them and other persecuted people suffering under ISIS's reign of terror. He's going to restore the special relationship and friendship between the United States and Israel, which President Obama has damaged. He understands that a strong American-Israeli relationship is an asset to our national security, not a liability. And make no mistake, Donald Trump and Mike Pence understand that religious liberty is a cornerstone of freedom that our nation has held dear for as long as we've been around. And he, Donald Trump, and Mike Pence will defend that principle at all levels. People of faith don't leave their religion in the church pews. We live it out wherever we are. The left is launching an assault on our culture and wants to strip God out of the public square. Our nation's religious heritage has helped make us what we are today. No American with religious convictions will have to bow at the altar of secularism if Donald Trump is president. And if you need any more motivation for why we need to elect Donald Trump, let me give you 2 words: Supreme Court. I'm sure everyone here has mourned the loss of Justice Scalia, who was a great jurist and an even better man. He was a great friend to the Constitution and our conservative movement. The best way to honor his legacy is to make sure a like-minded person fills his seat on the Supreme Court. Hillary Clinton, how many people think Hillary Clinton is going to be that person? Hillary Clinton is going to appoint, if she gets her chance, as many left-wing justices as she can to the Supreme Court and federal courts across this country. A Clinton Supreme Court will be entrenched for a generation and will reshape our country as we know it. We're not talking about the next 4 years. We're talking about the next 40. Her justices will treat the Constitution as a suggestion at best and a doormat at worst. We know she's going to side with the left in the fight for religious liberty. Any business owner of faith or any teacher in a faith-based school could find themselves in court just like Hobby Lobby did. It's not fantasy. Merely for exercising their rights in the same way Americans have done for centuries. She despises the Second Amendment rights and wants to overturn the Supreme Court's Heller decision, which reaffirmed the simple right of Americans to have a firearm in their own home. And she's an extremist. She's an extremist in her support for late-term and partial birth abortion. Planned Parenthood is out there working overtime to bankroll her campaign, and we have to stop her. Now we know that during her tenure, the State Department became a revolving door for Democrat lobbyists and insiders. She lied to the victims of the Benghazi attacks that an internet video was behind their deaths. And she's been lying to the American people for 18 months about how she recklessly mishandled our nation's most precious secrets and endangered our national security. I've got 2 young kids. I'm sure a lot of you have kids too. It worries me to think about the kind of country that my kids and all of your kids could be growing up in if President Hillary Clinton remakes the Supreme Court in her left-wing image. Donald Trump has promised to appoint conservative justices whose judicial compass is the Constitution. He's going to protect our rights that are at the crosshairs. They're at the crosshairs of these liberal secularists. And he's taking a conservative position on more than just the Supreme Court. He's going to work with our Republican Congress to restore accountable government and be a champion for traditional values. The Republican Party is standing up for your church and your children. Over the summer, the Platform Committee once again clearly reaffirmed what we believe in. We had 112 delegates drafting a document that takes into account Republican voices from every state and every territory. Compare that to the Democrats, who have handpicked 15 people huddling behind closed doors, not on television for you to watch, writing their platform because they know their agenda is far too extreme if the American people actually read it. And if you liked the 2012 platform, which people thought was one of the most conservative platforms we've ever had, well, you're really going to like the 2016 platform. Thanks to delegates like Tony Perkins, we've been able to uphold conservative principles which our country needs, protecting the life of the unborn, standing up for traditional marriage, declaring the importance of the two-parent family for the health and happiness of our children, defending our citizens' constitutionally protected right to worship according to their conscience, whether that's in their churches, their homes, and yes, even their businesses, making sure chaplains can do their jobs on military bases. I want you to know that our party is standing up for these freedoms, which the Obama administration now has spent years trampling. If Hillary Clinton is president, you know she's going to do the same thing. There's no way an individual who has this little regard for protecting our rights should get near the White House. The book of Romans urges us to abhor what is evil and hold fast to what is good. And I want you to know I take that call seriously. We want to rebuild our inner cities which have languished under decades of Democrat rule. We want to make sure every child has a good education. The Democrats want schools controlled by teachers' unions and want to fill our kids' heads with left-wing propaganda. Republicans believe in the right of every child to get a good education, regardless of what zip code they live in. We want school choice. We know that the classroom is not an assembly line, and kids shouldn't be brainwashed by liberals when they go to school. We want to honor the fact that all men and women are made in the image of God and stop the global trade in human trafficking. Our party wants to do good and seek justice for all Americans because we believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's why we spent the last 4 years building a nationwide ground game and have over 1,000 paid staffers in battleground states right now, bigger than we've ever had ever in the history of the RNC. That's why we started our Republican Leadership Initiative to train the next generation of Republican leaders who want to make a difference in their communities, no matter where they call home. And that's why we hired a new staff to restart a dialogue with communities we hadn't seen in a long time, and held listening sessions with businesses and community leaders around the country to find out their concerns and priorities for all voters in every community. We have recommitted our party to being the party of the open door because we want everyone to experience the blessings of liberty. The Declaration of Independence makes it clear all men are endowed with God-given rights, and it is our duty to preserve those promises for the next generation. If we don't do this, who will? At the end of the day, the stakes couldn't be higher in this election. We've got a choice to make. Either big government keeps holding the reins of power, or we take back the freedoms which have made America the greatest nation on earth. The founders, our founders of this country, knew how important the values of people, the people in this room, those values, we share the values of the American experiment in democracy. The people in this room share those values. John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." George Washington said, "It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government." We don't believe what we believe just for the heck of it. We believe in the laws of God because they are true and they are necessary for a free and thriving American republic. A moral people is one of the wellsprings of liberty. One of my favorite passages, and I may have shared this with you all in years past, one of my favorite chapters in the Bible is Isaiah chapter 6. And I'm sort of fascinated with this chapter. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but I think you understand where I'm going. It's the year King Uzziah died. And it was when Isaiah looked up into heaven and he saw God on the throne. And you remember that passage. It was so powerful and so amazing that he fell to the ground just by the sight of it. And he heard out a voice, and the voice from God said, "Whom shall I send?" And without knowing the mission, out of obedience, Isaiah said, "Here am I, send me." We have such an enormous opportunity in front of us. We're in a battle for freedom in this country. Do you believe that? We're in a battle of freedom, the same battle that founded this country. It's the same battle that James Madison reaffirmed in the Bill of Rights. It's the same battle that founded our party in 1854. And here we are today. It's a battle for freedom. I don't know, have any of you been to the, I'm sure you've, now that you're here, but I'm sure a lot of you have been to the World War II Memorial? Anybody? It's a story I like to tell because it brings it all together. I went there with my son, and like a lot of memorials, you get out of it what you're willing to put into it. You know what I mean. You go there, and you see all those quotes from Nimitz and Eisenhower and all these incredible heroes from that time. And you walk up to this place on the wall, those thousands and thousands of golden stars. And I was there with my little guy, and you start to figure it out. That for every one of those golden stars, 100 little guys didn't come home to mom and dad. And you parents out there know that obviously you can never put yourself, because you can't ever know what that's like, to put yourself in the shoes of a parent that goes through something like that. And I'm not suggesting that. But you know that little moment sometimes when you think about your kids, and if they're older, when they were little, and you wondered, I wonder what it'd be like if Jack didn't come home to mom and dad. And it kind of, you get that moment, and it just kind of hits you. And then you look in front of those golden stars in gold on the black granite, and it says, "Here we mark the price of freedom." We are in a battle for freedom in this country. We have a choice to make in this election. This is our moment to seize the opportunity before us. Let's lock arms together and do what we can together to help elect Donald Trump, President of the United States, and take back our country. Let's do it together. Thank you. God bless you. And let's make America great together. God bless. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have Donald Trump coming out in just a few moments. But just before we do, we have a really nice surprise for you that I think you're all going to like. So I need the hotel staff, if they would please come out and just set up a couple of chairs right here. Come on, hurry. John Voight, would you mind hurrying up? Michelle Bachmann, keep up. Come on, keep up. And right over there. No. Down. Now, John, they need to go back a little bit. Yours goes back just a little bit.
How about mine?
Oh, never mind. It's fine. Just leave it alone. Hey, folks, you want to help me thank the help? Awesome. Perfect. That was awesome. Volunteers, you can't boss them around. Just grateful for their help. All right. Without further ado, let me welcome back to the stage Family Research Council President of FRC Action, Tony Perkins.
Thank you very much. I tell you what, isn't the hotel staff great? Well, we have a really unexpected, unscheduled treat for you. This coming Sunday marks the 15th anniversary of 9/11. And I think it's appropriate that as we gather here 15 years later that we reflect on that, because America in many ways is at greater risk today than it was 15 years ago. And I think we need to ponder that as we approach this election. And so I think if I asked most of you in here, you could remember where you were on 9/11. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing. Well, to help us talk about this and put this election into perspective, I've asked America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, to join us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mayor, I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank you for, you've been here to the Values Voter Summit before, but I want to thank you for being here again. But I want to thank you for keeping the focus on national security and on America's interest in terms of protecting herself. And you know a little bit about that.
Unfortunately, I do, from being mayor for 8 years, then having the terrible attack. Remember, I became mayor virtually a year after the first attack on the World Trade Center. People think of it as 2001. Well, we were attacked in New York in 1993 by, again, Islamic radical terrorists. And I have been investigating, prosecuting, and studying Islamic radical terrorism since I was in the Ford administration in the 1970s. So for me, this is a lifetime effort. And I think I probably know as well as anyone what's at stake, because I saw what they can do and how committed they are to their evil and horrible ideas.
So when you look back 15 years, in your judgment, is the threat greater today? Has it lessened? Are we better prepared? How important is national security when we look at this election in November?
Well, it's very important. And it's probably more important than we realize, because we always, I think, Americans, as any normal, we always think of jobs and the economy as the most important issue. And of course it is, because people have to support themselves and they have to feed themselves and take care of their family. But national security is really important, largely because of the way in which this administration in Washington has deteriorated our national security. If you had asked me that question 9 years ago or 10 years ago, let's say on the 5th or 6th or 7th anniversary of September 11, I would say that our national security had somewhat improved. We were doing a better job at the airports. We were doing a better job in terms of exchanging intelligence, not only between and among our federal agencies, but with the international community. I mean, there are countries that we're not even friendly with that we have good intelligence relationships with. It's a different relationship. But since President Obama and Hillary Clinton, and I don't mean to be political, but it is a political issue, our national security has really deteriorated, and I feel our country is in more danger today than it was on September 11.
Well, we've seen that in recent terrorist attacks in California,
Well, that's what I'm referring to.
in Florida. And I want to talk for just a moment about the role that mayors have been forced to play as a former mayor. But before I do that, I know you're from New York, but I want to ask you about your shoes.
So I wear these shoes. Someone recommended them to me for the 4 or 5 days around September 11 to remind me of what September 11 is all about, and also to remind me of the one thing that makes me, well, there are two things really that lift my spirits when I think about that day, because all the rest of that day was horrible. And one of them was the American flag being put up by the 4 firefighters who looked just like the 4 Marines at Iwo Jima. And for me, that was so, it was like after 7 or 8 hours of hearing about all my firefighters being found dead, and police officers, and 10 of my best friends, and Father Michael Judge, who was the chaplain to the fire department, who was my spiritual advisor. And I can't tell you, I was at the bedside of 22 firefighters when they were dying with Father Judge. Father Judge taught me how to deal with death. And the first person I was informed died at the World Trade Center was Father Judge. So it was a terrible group of memories that comes back. But there are 2 memories that come back that lift my spirits. One is the American flag. So someone that I was talking to, a wife of a firefighter, suggested I should get a pair of shoes. I always wear the flag, but I should get a pair of shoes to remind me, and socks around September 11th, because it'll lift my spirits. I won't get depressed. So this is my Prozac.
It's effective.
And the second one were the construction workers. You know, about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon that day, when the fires were burning at like 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and we were still pulling people out, we were still saving people. That ended sometime that night, unfortunately and tragically. But a group of maybe 1,000 construction workers just walked down the street, and they were walking toward us. And I walked up to the guy that was the head. He was a big, giant guy, like all the construction workers are. And I said, what are you doing? What are you doing here? He said, I thought you could use us. I said, well, why? And he said, because we can lift big things. And darn it, they could lift big things. And they went right in the pile with the firefighters. And I was telling them, you can't go in without the mask on. You can't go in. And man, I couldn't stop. They would have knocked me right over. They just went right in, and they were pulling people out. And that sort of brought my spirit back. It was like,
That is the American spirit.
that is, you're darn right.
And it
it
is on greatest display when America is at greatest risk. And we've seen it just recently in Louisiana with the flooding there.
Yes.
After every natural or even man-made desire, we see the best of Americans who pull together to help their neighbors. They don't worry about union laws. They don't worry about the government bureaucrats. They just jump in and they help.
Right.
I would say that preemptively, isn't that where we are today in America? That we need to jump in because America is in crisis.
Yeah. Tony, first of all, I hope everything is going well. And my best wishes on what happened to you. You suffered greatly. And I know you have the strength and spirit to get through it, but still, God bless you.
Appreciate that.
Here's what I believe, and I'll try to simplify it. And this comes from 35 years of experience with radical Islamic terrorism. We are best off when we are on offense, not when we're on defense, and waiting for them to attack us. Right now, we are basically on defense, trying to figure out where they're going to attack us next. Is it going to be in Orlando? Is it going to be in San Bernardino? Is it going to be in Dallas? Is it going to be in New York, Atlanta, Chicago? Is it going to be in Paris? Is it going to be the priest whose head was cut off, which I thought got sparse coverage? I mean, I know it's just one life, but there's a great significance to dragging a priest off the altar and chopping his head off.
That was a first, and you're absolutely right. We have now seen ISIS breach the sanctity of a church, and yet it got scant coverage, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about going back 1,000 years to think of things like the era of barbarism. And of course, he's not the only one whose head was chopped off, but it was sort of symbolic of how far they will go and what they will do if you give them room to maneuver. On the other hand, if you are pushing them back, and you're pushing them back into their little caves, it's a little bit harder to be planning attacks while you're defending your life than it is when you got plenty of time to sit there with your computer. And these people now, here's why I say it's more dangerous. Al-Qaeda was a certain kind of group. They were run by really great warriors, horrible people. I don't mean to say they were good people, but they're great warriors. They won the Afghan war against the Soviets. I mean, they drove the Soviets out of Afghanistan. We always thought for good reasons, but really for bad reasons. They wanted to make it a Muslim state, an Islamic state. But they weren't sophisticated in the internet, the use of social media. The group now, whether it's ISIS or the 23 related groups, are much more sophisticated in the use of social media, much more able to self-activate, as we've seen, people in the United States than Al-Qaeda ever could have done, largely because they have a lot of recruits from France, from Germany, from England, and from the United States. They understand us better than Al-Qaeda did, and that's why it's more dangerous. And we don't understand them as well as we understood Al-Qaeda, because under the Obama-Clinton administration, our intelligence has dropped dramatically. I mean, when we had all those troops in in Iraq, we should have had them in Iran. When we had them in Iraq and...
We don't send troops there, just money.
Yeah. 33 billion to kill us. I mean, that gets turned around into killing us and our allies and getting ready to destroy Israel. When we had so many troops, we were getting a great deal of intelligence, because when you have a lot of troops in a country, like in Iraq, like in Afghanistan, you get a lot of intelligence. We're not getting that intelligence. Plus, rather than capturing people because Obama didn't want to fill up Guantanamo, he used drones to kill them. Well, okay, some of them you had to do that way. I always prefer capturing them, but I'm an investigator and a former prosecutor, and I want to get their information. I also can't figure out for the life of me what's more humane, waterboarding or killing somebody with a drone. At least if you're going to waterboard me, I get a choice. I can tell you the information. I can talk my way out of it. If you're going to get waterboarded, and I'm not proposing waterboarding, so don't get, let's not have it, but just you think for yourself, what's the moral difference between dropping a bomb on a man's head, who's a terrorist, or grabbing the man, sitting him down and telling him, if you don't tell me about all the other terrorists, I'm going to waterboard you. At least in the second situation, he gets a chance to save his life and do something good for society.
Well, and as you said, the intelligence value. Mayor, I want to go back, Mayor, to the issue of the municipalities. Being a mayor, now 15 years ago, I know your background associated with law enforcement, and I know that you cleaned up New York, and you were very strong in the law enforcement arena. I spent 10 years in law enforcement, so I understand that world. 15 years ago, our law enforcement was not as advanced and equipped as it is today when it comes to dealing with terrorism. However, it's still, I'm going to ask, I want to put this in the form of a question. Our local law enforcement has been forced to deal with an issue because our federal government has not. Is that a viable solution going forward?
With a president who can say the words radical Islamic terrorism, and therefore can point the country in the direction that we have to go, rather than the confusion that we have today, where we call the attack in Fort Hood, workplace violence. With a president who can do that, and can get the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security kind of like on the same page, what my belief has been, and I preach this all over, that the FBI and the Justice Department has to use the local police as their eyes and ears, because our new threat is coming from within our communities. You're not going to pick it up by intercepting emails, even Hillary Clinton's emails. I had to get it in. You know where you're going to get the information? You're going to get the information from the local police. So, yes, a lot of them have been trained. New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, very well trained. There's a whole course on precursors of terrorism that they go through. Things to look for, things to watch for. But the FBI has to use them as their eyes and ears, and that relationship has to be made closer. And for that, you need the right leadership. You need the right leadership that is explaining that we are in a war, and that this is an important priority. It's not just, another thing, which is the way it's treated by the president when he kind of acts very nonchalant about many of these attacks. So you've got basically 14, 15,000 FBI agents. You've got 800,000 sworn local police officers, including big ones like NYPD, Chicago, Los Angeles. Those 800,000 should be the eyes and ears of the FBI, and I believe Donald Trump can accomplish that.
When you look at how this administration has dealt with radical Islam, in fact, even going back and rewriting policies within the Department of Justice so that even the terminology of radical Islam cannot be used, how far has that filtered down to the local level?
I'll give you a practical example of how dangerous that is. In San Bernardino, before the attack, the two people who committed the attack were observed in their garage late at night doing things that their neighbors thought were very suspicious. Of course, they were both Arab looking. And some of the neighbors said they didn't turn them in because they felt maybe they were being prejudiced. So they were being affected by the tyranny of political correctness that is stopping us from reporting things we otherwise would report. Major Nadal in the Army gets promoted to major while he was writing, and it was being reported, jihadist screeds and communicating with terrorists overseas, and we promoted him to major. I'm sorry, I don't think that happens unless there's a kind of political correctness that has been, pushed on people. I know many people that are afraid to say Islamic extremist terrorism. We got to get free to that. We need like a Declaration of Independence from political correctness.
I'm for that.
And I could, if I had the time, tell you terrorist attacks that were stopped because of, in one case, a police officer who did see two Arab gentlemen surveilling a subway suspiciously, and by turning them in, he stopped a bombing of that subway and possibly several others. So this is very, very important. What the leader says is very important. When I was in the Justice Department, you couldn't use the word mafia. And do you know who got that taken out? Mario Biaggi and the Italian Civil Rights League. Mario Biaggi I put in prison. The Italian Civil Rights League was founded by Joseph Colombo, the head of a mafia crime family. And I was an Italian American, and my view was every group has good people and bad people. Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Muslims, Italians, whatever. And all the good people should be on one side, and we should all be against the percentage of bad people, which is roughly the same for all of us, on the other side. And I would like to see that happen in the Islamic world. I'd like to see that happen in a more dramatic way.
Yeah, more pronounced. Mayor, I think I can speak for many, many Americans, and reflecting back 15 years ago to the attack of 9/11, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being, the title America's Mayor, because of the leadership and the confidence that you instilled in a time of crisis that let people know we can get through that. And I say that for this, number one, to thank you. But number two, you could easily just enjoy retirement. You don't need to be out here, speaking at events like this and taking the risk of the media saying nice things about you.
I would be so uncomfortable if they did.
I know.
I would feel, I worked for Ronald Reagan, and President Reagan taught me something. He said, I read the New York Times editorials, and then I do the opposite.
Well, having said that, this was my question. Why are you spending your time out on the campaign trail with Donald Trump?
Two reasons. First, for my country. I believe that if this country is turned over to Hillary Clinton, we will end up being a European social democracy. And I believe Israel will be in grave jeopardy. And I believe that Islamic terrorism will continue to keep us on defense. When she said the other night, ruling out putting troops on the ground before she even got her sentence out, that is such a sign of weakness. The thing we hear most often from this president is no boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, no boots on the ground. At least leave the darn thing open as a possibility to frighten your enemy. So I'm doing it for my country and for my children, and I'm doing it because Donald Trump has been my friend for 28 or 29 years. I am absolutely disgusted at the way in which the press is covering him. This is a very good man. This is a very honest man. This is an enormously accomplished man who happens to be a tremendous executive, which is what you need in a president. And it reminds me of what Ronald Reagan went through. And in my view, Ronald Reagan was the greatest president of the second half of the 20th century. And since I know him as a personal friend, I can see those qualities in him. And I want America to see them. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
Did the mayor mention about his shoes by any chance? Okay, well, it's a little hectic back there, and I wasn't able to focus on it, but what a wonderful story. Before we bring out Mr. Trump, it would be fitting for us just to take a moment to remember Phyllis Schlafly, who, yes, indeed. Went to be with the Lord this week and is now in heaven. Truly one of the pioneers of our movement. If it wasn't for Phyllis Schlafly, there might not be a Values Voters Summit. Honestly, that's how important she is to our movement. And even until the Lord called her home, she was right on the front lines of the battle. I think it'd be fitting if we just take a moment of silence to remember Phyllis Schlafly and to pray for her family. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now coming to introduce the Republican presidential nominee is Academy Award-winning actor Jon Voight, who also is very good at moving furniture. He has been a popular actor in Hollywood for decades now, having been nominated 4 times for the Oscar, 10 times for the Golden Globe Award, having won that 4 times in addition to his Oscar. And yet he has remained true to his core convictions and outspoken in his support for conservative values. We're honored to have him come now to share his heart and then introduce Donald Trump after him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jon Voight.
They took my job. I'm so honored to be standing in front of all of you spiritual people who understand the meaning of God, the meaning of love, the meaning of righteousness. And I don't have to wonder whether you understand the meaning of right and wrong. I've had 2 great gifts given to me in my life. One was that I was able to meet the recently made saint, Mother Teresa. How that occurred, I can get into it another time. If anyone wants to ask me about it after this event, I'll be glad to tell the story. But for now, suffice it to say that I found myself standing in front of the great saint, and she blessed me. The second gift was being asked to portray Pope John Paul II in a wonderful miniseries. And in researching the role, I was overwhelmed to find that he had selected me to play him. Something, huh? I'm bringing these, these saints to everyone's consciousness because having these experiences, together with living as long as I have, I've come to know what good is and what bad is, and I know I can distinguish who Donald Trump is and who Hillary Clinton is. I feel there's a dark cloud over the country now. And we are all witness to Hillary Clinton's lies and corruption. We are witness to President Obama covering every false move that she makes and making them appear right. And we are witness to our so-called football heroes that are supposed to set examples for our young children that mock our national anthem. My heart aches watching Donald Trump day after day pouring his heart out, telling the American people what he wants to do to save the nation. How can anyone doubt his sincerity? I can only feel, if God allows truth to be said and heard, that we will see Donald Trump the next president of this great America. And he will lift the dark cloud that hovers over us now. And so it is with greatest honor and greatest respect that I introduce to you now the next president of the United States, Donald Trump.
How to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Thank you very much. Oh, John. And John is such a great actor and such a great person. He is such a great person. And he's really been with me a long time in a lot of different ways. He's been incredible. So I just want to thank John. And I hope he makes another movie very quickly because I love his movies. In particular, I wanted to thank our host, Tony Perkins, for his years of leadership. And we know all about that. And we all express our support for Tony as he deals with the aftermath of the terrible floods in Louisiana, where 2 weeks ago I spent some time and I saw some incredible, incredible people. Thank you. Right. Thank you. Amazing, amazing people. One of the greatest privileges of my journey has been the time I've spent with the evangelical community. And the support they gave me in those primaries was absolutely incredible, I have to tell you. All across the nation. A lot of people said, I wonder if Donald will get the evangelicals. I got the evangelicals. I'm going to make it up to you, too. You watch. There are no more decent, devoted, or selfless people than our Christian brothers and sisters here in the United States. True, so true. I've witnessed that incredible generosity all across this land, gotten to know so many people. I saw it during my trip to Louisiana, where Christian volunteers raced to help their fellow citizens in need. Franklin Graham is an example. He brought the most incredible people and equipment to Louisiana. And he didn't want anything for it. He's a great man. It's that spirit of giving that we will need to rebuild Louisiana and to rebuild this country, which is in serious, serious trouble. Yet our media culture often mocks and demeans people of faith, and you understand that. All the time I hear from concerned parents how much harder it is for a Christian family to raise their children in today's media environment. It is right, isn't it? Huh? It is right. Not even close. Your values of love, charity, and faith built this nation. So how can it be that our media treats people of faith so poorly? One of the reasons is that our politicians have really abandoned you to a large extent. And Hillary Clinton, you can forget about her. So let me state this right up front. A Trump administration, our Christian heritage, will be cherished, protected, defended like you've never seen before. Believe me. I believe it, and you believe it, and you know it. You know it. And that includes religious liberty. Remember. Remember. I recently had a chance to visit a church in Detroit. Great Faith Ministries International. Stand up if you remember. That's good. That was an amazing experience. And the bishop, what a great guy. In my remarks, I spoke about how African American church, and this is all across the country, for centuries have been the conscience of our nation. Their unbreakable faith and spirit overcame some of the most difficult periods in our history, leading us all to a better future. Very true. Amazing. This was such an amazing experience. This is the power of faith. It's the power to heal. It's the power to unite. It's the power to make all of us live better lives, all of us. Our nation today is divided. Nobody likes to say it, but we're living in a very, very divided nation. It will be our faith in God, in His teachings, in each other, that will lead us back to unity. Each of us here today has a role to play in bringing our country together, united in common purpose and in common values. So let's talk today about some of the things, and these are great things, that we can do together to create the American future for everybody, not just a certain group of people, but for everybody. The first thing we have to do is give our churches their voice back. It's been taken away. The Johnson Amendment has blocked our pastors and ministers and others from speaking their minds from their own pulpits. If they want to talk about Christianity, if they want to preach, if they want to talk about politics, they're unable to do so. If they want to do it, they take a tremendous risk that they lose their tax-exempt status. All religious leaders should be able to freely express their thoughts and feelings on religious matters. And I will repeal the Johnson Amendment if I am elected your president. I promise. So important. Thank you. That's so important. And I must tell you from the heart, this started a building of mine in Manhattan. I had 50 pastors in a big conference room. And we actually had 50 pastors, 2 rabbis, a couple of priests. We were all talking. And we were there for 2 hours. And at the end, it was a love fest. We all agreed. It was like a love fest. And I said to them, we were high up in a building on Fifth Avenue. And I said to them, I'd love your support. And I know when I can get support. I'm quite sophisticated. And I know they wanted to give me their total support, 100%, just like I had in the primaries. And I said, I really would like your support. And they didn't really know what I was talking about. And I said, what's going on here? They said, well, sir, we can't do that because we would be violating the laws. And I said, what's the punishment? Well, we could lose our tax-exempt status, which of course is a, massive penalty. I said, tell me about this. And we sat down, they talked about it. When did it happen? 1954 or so. Lyndon Johnson was having problems. Powerful guy. I actually, as his own way, you have to gain respect for what he was able to do. Can you imagine that this man single-handedly, he was having problems with churches. And there was a church in Houston that was giving him a hard time, maybe for very good reason. And he put in an amendment that basically stopped our great pastors and ministers and others from talking under the penalty of losing their tax-exempt status. So we were looking down onto the sidewalk, and there were people walking on the sidewalk. And I said, so, folks, what you're telling me is those people walking way, way down there on the sidewalk have really more power than you do because they're allowed to express their feelings and thoughts openly and without penalty. And one of the pastors who I knew very well, and these are powerful people, these are strong people with magnificent voices and magnificent hearts, much more importantly. They looked at me and they said, that's actually right. They have more power than we do. We're not allowed to express. And that's when I said, we have to start thinking about this. And I thought about it. And then we had a large group of pastors again. I said, I have thought about it. If I become president, we are going to knock out the Johnson Amendment. We are going to do that. And it's not going to be hard. It's not going to be hard. When you think from the standpoint of political, you have more than men. Let's say men are 50%, women are 50%. You're much more than 50% added together. And I actually believe that's one of the reasons why you haven't seen Christianity and other religions within the United States going like a rocket ship, like our polls have been going in the last 4 weeks, a rocket ship, right? I really believe that. Because you're great people. The people that you rely on Sunday and all during the week, they've been stopped from talking and speaking by a law. And we're going to get rid of that law. We're going to get rid of it so fast. And I'm so proud to say, honestly, I don't want to take credit, but you had 50 people in that first meeting and many more in the second. I'm so proud. I was just telling this to Tony, to say, that was my idea. I figure it's the only way I'm getting to heaven, so this is going to be very good. The only way. So we're going to get rid of it, and we're going to let your great people speak, and you're going to see something happen that's going to be very, very good. Okay? So important. I hope, which means you have to get out and vote. On November 8th, you cannot, you didn't vote 4 years ago. You didn't vote. You didn't. Well, you did. Few of you did. Believe me, I know. I look at the stats. You didn't vote. But this time you really have, and this is your last chance. This is it. I mean, we'll never have this opportunity again. So I hope you can get every one of your friends and just get up your family and your friends and get out and vote. Okay? November 8th. Thank you. And if you do, we're going to win by a lot. That's not going to even be a close election. And if you don't, could be a very unhappy November 8th. We're also going to repeal and replace disastrous Obamacare. Which gives the government control over the lives of everyday citizens, and the numbers are horrendous. Your premiums are going up by 50, 60, 70%. The deductible is so high you never get to use it unless you are going to lead a very long and very complex bad period. Very, very long. It is a disaster. It's a disaster, and everybody knows it, and it's going to die of its own weight anyway. But we're going to get rid of it, and we're going to replace it with some great, great alternatives. Much better health care at a much lower price. Hillary Clinton wants to have completely government-run health care, which would be a disaster for the liberties and freedoms of all America. That's what she wants. That's what she's aiming at. That's what Obama wanted. He didn't quite get there, but he got this, and you see how bad this has been. One of the biggest issues in this race is going to be the issue of school choice. And I can't possibly emphasize this enough. Millions of poor and disadvantaged students are trapped in failing schools. This education crisis afflicts all communities, but none more so than the African American community. None. The Democratic Party has run the inner cities of America for 50, 60, 70 years, some cases over 100 years. Over 100 years. Their policies and their politics, and in particular the politics of people like Hillary Clinton, have produced only poverty, joblessness, and rising crime. When she was running for the Senate in New York State, she said she was going to produce jobs, jobs, jobs. In upstate New York, it's a disaster. She's going to produce jobs. Big thing. Jobs. We're going to bring back jobs. It's been a catastrophe. We've lost tens of thousands of jobs. She never did a thing. It was all talk, no action, just like what she's doing right now is all talk, no action. She'll talk, and nothing will happen. Only bad will happen. But you just have to ask the people in upstate New York. She won because of them, and she produced absolutely nothing. Jobs left. It's today one of the worst, one of the most depressing places in this country. So just remember that when you hear her talking about jobs. I know jobs. She doesn't know jobs. That I can tell you. I have outlined a new civil rights agenda for our time. The right to a safe community, a great education, and a secure job. And I say to African American parents, I say to Hispanic American parents, and I say it with great respect, our inner cities are a disaster. Crime, no jobs, education is the worst, in many cases, almost worldwide bad, and in many cases, actually worldwide bad. I say, with great respect, what do you have to lose? It can't get any worse. It can't get any worse. You choose Donald Trump, I'm going to fix the problem. You're going to have safety. You're going to have good education. We're going to get jobs because we're going to bring our jobs back. Mexico's taking our jobs. So many other places, they're taking our jobs. What China's doing to us is horrible. We're going to have jobs. What do you have to lose? I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. School choice is at the center of the civil rights agenda. And my goal is to provide every single inner city child in America that is trapped in a failing government school the freedom to attend the school of their choice. Competition, the schools will get better and better and better. And that means a private school, a religious school, a charter school, or a magnet school. School choice also means that parents can homeschool their children. 100%. Hillary Clinton opposes school choice because she is controlled totally, like a puppet by special interests. Her policies will force millions of African American and Hispanic children to remain stuck in failed government schools, leading to higher unemployment and more poverty. The poverty levels in this country, nobody will believe. Nobody will believe. My plan will break the government monopoly and make schools compete to provide the best services for our children, including every African American and Hispanic child in this country, every single one of them. This proposal begins with a $20 billion block grant from the federal government for states to pursue school choice programs. However, that's good, right? However, because 90% of education spending is at the state level, I will campaign to get the states to reallocate another $110 billion of their education budgets to school choice programs. If we do this, that would mean $12,000 in school choice funds for every disadvantaged student in America. What a difference this is going to make. The money will follow the student to the public, private, or religious school that is best for them and their family. In so many ways, you're going to have choice. My administration will partner with the leadership of any inner city, anybody in the inner cities of America willing to run a pilot program, and there will be a lot of them, to provide school choice to every child in that community. In Baltimore, for instance, that would mean more than $15,000 in funds available per student. As your president, I will be the biggest cheerleader for school choice you've ever seen. This means a lot to me because I know it can turn things around. Again, the education can't get worse. Common Core, we're going to end it. We're bringing education locally. I will fight for every child in this country who deserve better futures. The African American community has heard my message that I am going to make the inner city safe again, and I'm going to bring back jobs, and I'm going to bring back the great education. Don't be surprised. Remember this, November 8th. Don't be surprised because we have been given a lot of support over the last 3 or 4 weeks. If on November 8th, I get more African American and Hispanic votes than anyone thought possible about a month ago. You see what's going on. People are starting to hear about this and they're saying, wow, they're liking it. And again, can't get any worse. It's going to get a lot better, but only if I do it. They can't do it. The Democrats, what they've done is incredible. And Hillary Clinton will be absolutely more of the same, rigid. It'll never change. Remember, 100 years, 70 years, 50 years, it's not going to change. Not going to happen. Now let's talk about another issue that will define the future of this country for generations to come. The United States Supreme Court. Earlier this year, we lost the great Justice Antonin Scalia. The next president will not only have to fill this seat, but as many as 4 others. It could even be, we could end up with a total of 5 judges by one president. It would be record-setting. Probably be 3. Could be 4, could even be 5. And you pick the wrong people, you have a country that is no longer your country. It will be a disaster. One of the most important issues, frankly, other than maybe defense, because we're going to build up our military, it's so depleted. We're going to take care of our vets. We're going to protect your Second Amendment, so many things. But one of the most important, some people think it's actually the most important, is the filling of the seats, United States Supreme Court. You see what's happening right now. Essentially, it's 4 and 4. And you see how bad it is. We're going to pick great judges. I've already put a list of 11. Federalist Society, highly recommended. Got uniform great reviews on these 11 people. And we are going to put truly great people. Maybe we use Judge Scalia as the ultimate example of what we're looking for, okay? This will determine whether or not we remain a constitutional republic, frankly. That's what's going to happen. I have pledged to appoint judges who will uphold the Constitution, to protect your religious liberty, and apply the law as written. We reject judges who rewrite the Constitution to impose their own personal views on 300 million plus Americans. Not going to have that. I've made public a list of judges, as I said, that will guide my selection process. Hillary Clinton has refused to provide such a list, and we brought it up. Let's see your list. You ever saw the list, you would walk out of here not feeling very well. Because she knows the extremist judges she would pick would be rejected by the overwhelming majority of the American public. They'd be rejected. Clinton's judicial picks would allow her to completely take over American healthcare, the American economy, and Americans' religious liberty. Not to mention your Second Amendment, which is on very thin ice right now, as you know, because of the fact that we're at 4-4. If they even pick one judge who's wrong, you can probably, as you know it, you can kiss the Second Amendment goodbye. And we don't want to see that. Another issue in this race of great importance to everyone in this room is the issue, of course, of national security. Just today, it was announced that North Korea performed its 5th nuclear test, its 4th since Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State. It's just one more massive failure from a failed Secretary of State. It's failed at everything. Her policies have also put Iran onto a path of nuclear weapons, and I have to say, made them overnight an absolute power. They were dying 3 years ago. The sanctions were choking them. They would have fallen, but Obama didn't support people that would have taken over, and I think in this case probably would have taken over the right way. Got no support. But you look at what's happened to Iran in such a short period of time. But remember the ransom payments. Remember it was $400 million 2 weeks ago. But then they made a mistake. This is cash. Remember they said they paid cash because they couldn't open a bank account? There was no way of sending it into a checking account. All lies. Just like Obamacare was a big lie. Remember, you can use your plan, you can use your doctors. 27 times, right? 27 times. Use your doctors, use your plan. Turned out to be a lie. It's all a lie. It's all a big lie. It's a rigged system and it's a lie. And I'll tell you what, the 400 million, for those that have been reading the papers over the last 2 days, turned out to be 1.7 billion in cash. Cash! And I actually said, they said, oh, that money's going to be used for terror. I said, no, they don't need it for terror. They've got 150 billion. That's in addition to the $150 billion that we're giving back. I said, they don't need it. This is going into their Swiss accounts and going into their accounts. They're not going to use it for terror. They have plenty of money for terror. Think of it, $1.7 billion in cash. Massive, big vats of cash. You saw them. Cartons. Never saw anything like it. I've seen a lot of cash. Tell you, never saw anything like this. 1.7 billion. Can you imagine these guys? Planes they stop. Remember, they wouldn't give back the hostages. They waited there for hours and hours, and Obama kept saying, no, no, this has nothing to do. Even the hostages said they kept us waiting for a certain plane to come in, not to take them back, because they were waiting for something. It was this, just another lie. But can you imagine these people sitting there, and they see 1.7 billion in cash? Ay, 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 they think we're stupid. They think we're stupid. They won't be thinking it for long. Very sad. At the same time, ISIS is hunting down and exterminating what it calls the nation of the cross. ISIS is carrying out a genocide against Christians in the Middle East. We cannot let this evil continue. Can't let it. ISIS must be destroyed. Have to. Have no choice. To defeat ISIS, we must use military warfare, but also cyber warfare, financial warfare, and ideological warfare. It's a whole different ballgame today than it was 50 years ago and 200 years ago. Different world. We must also establish a bipartisan goal in the United States and an international goal with our allies of defeating radical Islamic terrorism. Words that our president won't use and words that Hillary Clinton won't use. Just like we won the Cold War by identifying our enemy and building a consensus to guide a long-term strategy, so too must we do the same with Islamic terrorism. By the way, President Obama has allowed Syrian refugees to pour into our country at unbelievable rates. And Hillary Clinton wants to allow 550% more. But it's almost impossible to get a Christian in from Syria. They take others, but they don't take Christians. Very rare, very rare. So I said that we need to make safe zones in the region. We want to take care of people. But we absolutely cannot allow this potential tremendous threat to continue. And we have to stop this. This is going to be potentially a catastrophe for our country. It's from within. This could be the all-time great Trojan horse. This could be it. You ever notice on the, you look at the migration trail and you see people with cell phones. And some of the cell phones have the ISIS flag printed on them. And some of them have things far worse than that. Scenes far worse than that. So it was the failed policies, you have to remember, of Hillary Clinton and Obama that unleashed ISIS in the first place. If they did the right thing, you wouldn't be talking about ISIS right now. Now she wants to get rid of them. Oh, we're going to get rid of them. You know, she tells them already, there will be no boots on the ground. Now, even if you don't want boots on the ground, you don't want to say it. Don't say it. Now they're saying, oh, I hope she wins. Oh, boy, would they dream of having her as president. Can you imagine? They dream about it every night, having Hillary Clinton. But even if you believe, and I can understand that, no boots on the ground, I can understand. You don't say it. Let them think they're going to go through hell. Don't say it. Can you imagine the great General Douglas MacArthur. Can you imagine the great General George Patton, or one of our great generals that we have today, General Flynn, who's here someplace? I love General Flynn. But can you imagine these people saying, I mean, they're basically giving out the strategy. There will be no boots on the ground. If you don't want that, I fully understand. Don't say it. Don't say it. Can you imagine MacArthur saying, we're going to fight the enemy, and we're going to move our troops in about a month. We're going to hit from behind. We're going to hit them from the front. And everything they say turns out to be true. You know, I hate to say this because we have a lot of evangelicals in this room. But maybe we shouldn't be so honest when it comes to military strategy. Does that make sense? Hope I didn't lose your vote for saying that. Just look at what her policies have left us with in Iraq, Syria, and Libya. The problem is Hillary Clinton is trigger happy. She really is. She's trigger happy. And yet she says no boots, which is sort of interesting. Probably will be boots, you know, probably will turn out to be another disaster. Her tenure has brought us only war and destruction and death. She's just too quick to intervene, invade, or to push for regime change with people we don't even know who they are. And they take over and they're far worse. This creates the power vacuums that are filled by terrorists and groups like ISIS. My administration, on the other hand, will work with any country that is willing to partner with us to defeat ISIS and halt radical Islamic terrorism. And by the way, that includes Russia. If they want to join us on knocking out ISIS, that is just fine as far as I'm concerned. It's a very imperfect world, and you can't always choose your friends. It's life. But you can never fail to recognize your enemies. We have some real enemies. Unfortunately for our country, our enemies probably hacked into Hillary Clinton's emails. These are the same emails she destroyed after receiving a federal subpoena. What's that? Using software in order to bleach the emails so you can never, ever see them. She even mysteriously lost 13 different phones before the FBI got them. And many were destroyed with a hammer. Did anybody ever hit a hammer? Well, you know, maybe 2 or 3 people. But they were just released from prison, those 2 people. Oh, can you believe this? Destroyed them with a hammer. The old-fashioned way, I guess. The other night, in the Commander-in-Chief Forum, did anybody see that? How did I do? Good. Well, we have a big debate coming up. Who knows what's going to happen there? But I will say, every poll has me winning big league, the Commander-in-Chief. The polls came out after that event, and we won big league. Now we have a debate coming up. I don't imagine any of you are going to be watching the debate, right? I won't, I promise. Hillary Clinton answered questions on her emails horribly. That's why she lost. That's why she did so poorly. She was terrible. She was, honestly, I shouldn't be saying this. She was terrible. She keeps talking about the emails. Every time she talks about them, she talks about them differently. It seems each week, it's true, she has like a different answer. But there can be no answer when she deletes 33,000 emails, bleaches them so they can never be recovered, an unheard of practice, hammers them into total silence. You know what's happening. You know what's happening. I always say getting away with that will be the single greatest accomplishment of her career. It's true. It's true. So her answers were bad. They were bad. And a lot of people said they were so totally dishonest. And you know, she was blaming Matt Lauer. I thought Matt Lauer did a very good job. I mean, his questions to me were very tough. But the gentleman who stood up and said, honestly, you should be in prison for what you did. To me, that was the tough one. That was that was a tough question. It was sort of a question in the form of a statement, right? Hillary Clinton is unfit to be our president for many reasons. True. True. She's unfit for many reasons, the biggest of which is her judgment. It's just so bad. It's time to restore honesty and integrity to our government. Have to do it. And one more issue, final issue I want to discuss today is the economy and helping those in need. There is no more charitable group in this country than Christians, and all of us, true, and all of us here today are determined to lift suffering Americans out of poverty. We're going to do it with a lot of other people going to help. As your president, I will pursue a complete reform of our economy to bring back millions of new jobs into our country. Millions of new jobs. We've lost our jobs like we're a bunch of babies. They've gone to other countries. They've gone to Mexico. They've gone to many other countries. China's taking massive advantage of us. It's all so easy, believe me. It's all so easy. That includes, we will be doing massive tax cuts for working families and for businesses. It includes, very importantly, the elimination of all needless, job-killing regulations. It includes lifting the restrictions on American energy, which is under siege. I will also renegotiate NAFTA, and if they don't want to renegotiate it so it becomes a two-way highway, not just a one-way highway out of the United States for our companies and our jobs, we will terminate NAFTA, believe me. We'll stand up to China, and we're going to fight for every last job. It's going to be America first, and it's going to be the American worker first. Crucially, I will also fight for the American family and American family values. The family must be at the center of any anti-poverty agenda. Has to be. Thank you. Our country just lost one of the great champions for the American family, Phyllis Schlafly. Great woman, really great woman. We send our thoughts and prayers to her loved ones. I will be going to her funeral tomorrow in St. Louis. Phyllis fought very hard to the very end for a free and prosperous America. She understood that to be truly united as a country, we can't simply turn to government or to politicians. The bedrock of our unity is the realization that we are all brothers and sisters created by the same God. Phyllis understood that. Phyllis understood that. And by the way, Phyllis endorsed me a long time ago when it wasn't necessarily something that was so easy to do. And she was incredible. She was so brave. She endorsed me, and that was not the thing to do at the time. People said, Trump. She said, he's going to win. You don't understand. He knows how to win. He's going to win. They said, Phyllis, not going to be Trump. And we went boom, boom, boom. But I will tell you, Phyllis endorsed me at a time when it wasn't necessarily the thing to do, even the popular thing to do. And I will never forget that. That had a huge impact. She was a great, great, powerful woman with a tremendous heart. And I look forward to being with her family tomorrow because you really celebrate. It's a celebration. She was 92 years old. We are all equal, and we all come from the same Creator. If we remember that simple fact, then our future is truly limitless. There is nothing we as Americans can't do. There's a biblical verse that I've often read, and I want to repeat it again because I think it is so important to what we're trying to achieve right now for our country. It's from 1 John chapter 4. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. So true. So true. Imagine what our country could accomplish if we started working together as one people under one God, saluting one flag. It's time to stop quibbling over the smallest words and time to start dreaming about the great adventures that lie ahead for our country. This is my promise to all of you. Starting in 2017, we will be one American nation. It's time to break our ties with the bitter failures of the past and to embrace a new American future. Have to do it. Together, we will make America believe again. We will make America united again. And we will make America great again. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to think of how I can transition from that to letting you know that the restrooms are right outside and to your left. But that's my job. Hey, just a quick point I wanted to mention that Mr. Trump pointed out so eloquently, and I just wanted to give you those stats. In the last year, there were 10,801 Syrian refugees. 56 were Christians. Think about that. That's like 99.3% Muslim, and the remainder were Christian. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of that, I want to transition to whether our military is ready or not. And we put together a very impressive panel to answer that very question. And coming to lead this group is one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force and a 3-star general. who's been involved in nearly every major American conflict during his 36-year Army career. Today, he serves as the Executive Vice President for the Family Research Council. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin and our panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're already behind, so I got to make up a little time here. If I can get my panel out here. It's kind of hard maneuvering around the Secret Service here, so. Come on. Anybody know a joke? Hillary Clinton, yeah, okay. Well said, all right. Okay, we're going to jump right into this in the interest of time here. We're going to talk about military readiness. The title of our panel is the U.S. Military Ready or Not. We have three distinguished panelists today. First, we have Elaine Donnelly, starting on the other end there. Yeah. And this lady knows more about certain aspects of readiness in the military than anybody. She, in 1992, was the president of the President's Commission on what we say was Women in Combat. And she was also a member of the Dakowitz. And today she is the president of the Center for Military Readiness and one of those people that knows an awful lot about military readiness. Next, we have Congressman Jim Bridenstine from Oklahoma. Yes, one of the most conservative members of Congress today and a true warrior in his own right. He is a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy Reserve. He flew the E-2C Hawkeyes in Iraq and Afghanistan. He is now an FA-18 pilot, still in the Navy Reserve. In fact, I was out there a couple of weekends ago and missed him because he was doing his reserve duty. And then finally, we have Major General retired Gary Harrell, former commander of the Delta Force. Commissioned in the infantry, served in the 82nd Airborne, then in Special Forces, and then he came to Delta while I was a young officer there myself. And a distinguished combat record. He commanded all the Special Forces and Special Operations Forces for the Central Command right after 9/11. He took them all into Afghanistan there. And he's a very dear personal friend of mine because we share something very unique in that we were both wounded at the same time, and he's a very special friend. So I want to jump right into it, and I'm going to ask Congressman Bridenstine to give us a short presentation on where we stand with military readiness. So Congressman Bridenstine, please.
Well, thank you, General. Can everybody hear on this microphone? Awesome. Well, it's an honor to be here. I always appreciate speaking at the Value Voters Summit, and of course, a lot of us in Congress look to the Family Research Council for good advice and information when we make important decisions in Washington. So thank you to the FRC. Thank you, General Boykin, for having me on this panel. I want to make a point of something. One of the reasons I initially got involved in running for Congress is because I was a pilot in the United States Navy Reserve. Actually, I'm in the Oklahoma Air National Guard today. But at the time I got elected, I was a pilot in the Navy Reserve flying E-2 Hawkeyes, and I was doing counter-drug operations down in Central and South America. We would fly out of places like Curacao, El Salvador, Barranquilla, Colombia, and other places. My squadron, VAW 77, the Night Wolves, we were responsible for busting $2 billion worth of cocaine every year on the high seas. $2 billion. Every year. Well, there was a time when members of Congress decided that we needed to cut federal spending, which we all agree with. And what they said is we're going to put together a plan to cut discretionary spending. Actually, it was a plan to cut mandatory spending. When we think about federal spending, mandatory spending constitutes about 2/3 of federal spending. When I say mandatory, I'm talking about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Obamacare, SNAP, the food stamp program. These are mandatory programs. What that means is that your members of Congress, we do not authorize and we do not approve those programs on an annual basis. We don't appropriate the money for those programs. If you qualify for the money, you get the money, and the only way those programs get modified, changed, reformed is if Congress intervenes and changes them. Well, Democrats want to spend more on those programs. And by doing nothing, those programs grow, and they have been growing very rapidly. Republicans are scared that if we touch those programs, somebody will make a commercial of Republicans throwing grandma off the cliff. So Republicans don't touch those programs either, even though they're growing very rapidly. So what we fight about in Congress is 1/3 of federal spending called discretionary spending. Half of that 1/3 is defense spending. And back in 2011, here's what they said in Congress. They said, we're going to come to an agreement on that 2/3 of federal spending that is mandatory. And if we don't come to an agreement, we're going to institute something called the sequester, which is an across-the-board cut of that discretionary side of the ledger, half of which is defense. This is a major problem that the Department of Defense has been going through now for a long time. My squadron, VAW 77, busted $2 billion worth of cocaine every year on the high seas, got eliminated, just like that. And that is one of many units across this country that got eliminated. And this limits the ability of our commanders and the folks that make decisions for our national security. It limits their opportunities to make good decisions because they don't have the resources available to them that they used to have available to them. So now you've got $2 billion worth of cocaine coming into the country. And even worse, you've got $2 billion worth of cash going to fund transnational criminal organizations down in Central and South America that are destabilizing countries in our own hemisphere. So when this happened to my squadron, I said, look, if you voted for this and you're a member of Congress, you guys probably remember they called it, it was the Budget Control Act. And if these folks, they created the super committee, 12 of them. None of them were from Oklahoma, but they had to come to an agreement to cut mandatory spending. And if they didn't, then it would trigger the sequester. And these 12 members of Congress got to make decisions to cut spending and increase taxes. There would be an up or down vote on the floor of the House, but there'd be no debates, no amendments, and no filibuster. And if it failed, it would decimate the Department of Defense. And the purpose of this was to be so painful that it would never happen, that Congress would have to come to an agreement. Well, Congress didn't come to an agreement. And so now the Department of Defense has been decimated. Our capabilities have been limited. And there's a whole host of programs and challenges that we've been working through since I've been here. Now, here's the challenge since I've been in Congress. What we've been doing year in and year out, have we been doing the 12 appropriation bills that constitute that 1/3 of federal spending that we authorize and appropriate every year? No. Have we been increasing spending for the Department of Defense? No. What we've been doing is we've been going to the end of the year every year, just like we are right now. We've got a government shutdown looming at the end of this month if we don't do something. And we roll all 12 appropriation bills into one massive package, and we fund next year exactly as we funded last year. And you either fund the whole government or the whole government shuts down. That's not the way this country has ever been run before this president, but that's the way it's being run now. Why? Because they don't want to see $1 more going to the Department of Defense unless you also increase spending for all the other federal programs. And oh, by the way, here's what they say when they do this. You're going to fund Planned Parenthood, or we're going to shut down the Department of Defense. That's why they roll all 12 of these appropriation bills into one massive package. That's why we pass appropriation bills in the House, they go to the Senate, and Harry Reid kills them all. He kills all of them. Why? Because he wants to make sure that if we don't fund Planned Parenthood, or the Syrian Refugee Resettlement Program, or all the EPA rules and regulations, or the president's illegal executive order for amnesty. The Constitution says Congress has the authority to create an uniform rule of naturalization. If you don't fund all those things, they've got this trump card called the Department of Defense, and the whole discretionary side of the ledger will shut down unless you fund those programs. Unfortunately, you've got a Congress that is unwilling to fight and instead does these continuing resolutions that have been hurting the Department of Defense. With that, I'll yield and listen to my other panel members.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to questions.
Okay, Elaine.
Thank you, General. I am so excited to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to pick up where the Congressman left off. Is our military ready or not? This is a hot topic. Perhaps some of you remember earlier this year, Fox News carried a program on this very topic. And it talked about shortages and equipment failures, aircraft falling out of the sky. And a lot of people asked, why is this happening? Resources have been taken away. But this program also broke new ground, because you remember the image of ROTC cadets marching in red high heels? Why did that happen? What is going on with our military? That was training to deal with sexual assault in the armed forces. It shocked a lot of people, and I'm going to give you a few reasons to understand why this is happening. Back in 1992, I was a member of a presidential commission. We studied the issue of women in combat for a full year, and the first thing we decided was, how are we going to decide? On the issue of women in combat, we had a very simple principle, a resolution we voted on. Equal opportunity is important, but if there is a conflict,
Unfortunately, I have lost my feed. All right, unfortunately, I lost my visuals from the summit. I was enjoying that. I know I actually get my live feeds via satellite, and CNN cut me off from that summit out of Washington, D.C. I apologize. I was initially cut off and then found another one, but it looks like they've taken both of my sources. What we're currently looking at is out of Austin, Texas. It is a car that's just dangling from this parking garage in Austin, Texas. So let's take a look at this for a little while and see what happens. Kind of interesting. Let me see if I can find some additional details on it via Twitter. All right, and I'm actually going to wrap. What do we have coming up here on... I'm actually going to wrap. Let me see if I can get you something else to watch that's exciting here pretty soon.